ahead and introduce Michaella Rugwizangoga, who is the Chief Tourism Officer of Rwanda Development. And get this is the most fascinating thing about this lady. She is the youngest and the first Black CEO of Volkswagen Mobility Solutions Rwanda. Isn't that amazing? Please, Michaella, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I think it's not easy to speak either early morning or early afternoon. In between, it's all good. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, excellencies, esteemed colleagues, partners, it is an honor and a privilege to welcome you all to the Africa Soft Power Summit, where we gather here not only as representative of various nations and industries, but as visionaries united by a common goal: to harness and to amplify the power of Africa. Africa Soft Power, our culture, creativity, innovation, and intellectual prowess represent an invaluable asset in shaping global narratives, influencing international relations, and driving sustainable development. And yet, this summit is a testament to our collective belief that Africa's unique voice and perspective has the potential to make a profound impact on the world stage. And I think it was said earlier during one of the sessions here that African brands should influence the world. African culture should also have its own, stand in the global stage. In recent years, we have witnessed strides in the realm of art, music, literature, technology, and entrepreneurship across the continent. African creators and innovators are not just participating in global conversation, but are leading them, bringing fresh perspective and pioneering solutions that address some of the most pressing challenges of our time. Today, we have the opportunity to build on this momentum, and over the next few days, we will engage in dynamic discussion, share insight, and explore strategic insight to elevate Africa's soft power. Our focus will be on leveraging our cultural heritage, fostering innovation, and creating sustainable economic growth that benefits all of us. As we embark on this journey, let us remember that the true essence of soft power lies in our ability to connect, to inspire, to transform. It is through collaboration, mutual respect, and a shared vision that we can unlock the full potential of our continent. I encourage you to actively participate, to learn from one another, and to forge new partnerships that will propel our continent forward. Together, we can create a future where all Africans have incredible opportunities. Thank you for being here today. And we look forward to an incredible summit, not just here in the session, but in the side events, in the dinners, in the gala, and the site visits on Saturday. With these few words, we wish you a fruitful summit and an enjoyable stay in Rwanda. And don't forget to visit Rwanda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you're doing a fantastic job with that. Thank you so much. And just as a reminder, we are on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, hashtag ASP Summit 2024 and hashtag Raw Conference 24. Please let the world know what we're doing here today.
And so moving swiftly along, I would like to introduce our first panel. But before we do, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of one of our most esteemed guests, Her Excellency, Dr. Joyce Banda, former President of Malawi. Thank you so much for joining us, Madam. So going straight to our first panel, Revolutionizing Systems, Women's Leadership as a Catalyst for Change and Progress. This panel will discuss the importance of the leadership of women across a broad section of sectors and how we can leverage that inclusion and active participation to move our continent forward. Our moderator for this session is my big brother, Dr. Ozonnia Ojielo, who is the UN Resident Coordinator in Rwanda and representative of the Secretary General to the UN in Rwanda. Thank you so much for joining us. He just sits here.
Your Excellency, Dr. Joyce Banda, very good to see you this morning, ma'am. Your Majesty, Abogidi, Obio Foundation, distinguished friends, colleagues, welcome to this first panel. So let me quickly invite my panelists in no order of importance or seniority, but I'd like to invite Katharina Link, who is the CEO for Pulse Africa. A round of applause for Katharina. Let me also invite my dear sister, Clare Akamanzi, until recently chair of the Rwanda Development Board, but now the Chief Executive Officer for NBA Africa. And another dear sister of mine who just spoke now, Michaella Rugwizangoga, the Chief Tourism Officer for Rwanda, based at the Rwanda Development Board. Another applause, never enough, right? And then, of course, last but not the least is the chair of Africa Soft Power, Caroline Abade, CEO, Group CEO, EXP. Thank you. I do hope that their resumes are on the website of Soft Power Africa, because extremely impressive resumes. And if I go ahead to talk about their resumes, it will take up the 1 hour we have for this conversation. So I won't do that. And I think that the first discussion this morning by the sponsors was an excellent foundation for the discussion we're going to have. Because our discussion, it's about revolutionizing systems and how women's leadership could be the catalyst for change and progress in Africa. And the first discussion looked at cutting-edge areas, sports, entertainment, creative industry, you name that. And who are the most participants? It's the women, but they are not yet in decision-making. So we have a fantastic conversation looking at systems, because the three dimensions for change are about 1, attitudes and behaviors, 2, norms and values, but 3, systems. The most foundational are systems, because they go to the structural issues, the foundational issues, and why perhaps change has been difficult or protracted. So I'll begin by asking my panelists 2 questions to each of them, but I do want this to be conversational as well. So I'd like to create a forum also for the audience to join in asking questions. So Claire, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with you. Yes, good. So let's explore with you some of the ways that women's leadership can most effectively challenge and disrupt existing power structures and systems so that we can achieve the goal of greater inclusivity and equality. And who better to answer that than you as a path breaker in many parts, many things you've done, but also in Basketball Africa, leading something that is historically been thought of, for men in Africa, not for women. So over to you, Claire.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. It's always very nice to be here in this Soft Power Summit. I think we like to really unleash the soft power that is women, right?
Yeah.
But to your question, I think in order to build systems, the first and most important thing is creating and fulfilling opportunities that women can really engage. So for me, it starts with opportunity, creating the opportunity and having those opportunities exploited by women. And for us at the NBA and NBA Africa, it's extremely important for us to be part of that story, creating opportunities for women to participate in sports. As you said, Ozonnia, sports is very much dominated by men. But in the NBA, we have the WNBA. We have women participating in a league that is very specific to women. But also here in Africa, we have very specific programs that we put in place to support women to participate in the game of basketballs. Because I think an opportunity that a woman has to really unleash her own potential is the best story to tell other women that it's possible. So what we've done, I'll just give you a few examples of what we've done in the theme of opportunity. One thing that we have is we really create opportunities for boys and girls. We have a program called Junior NBA program for children under 16 years, where we give them access to NBA programs and accessing the basketball game. In that aspect, we have women and girls, or girls and boys, participate as much as boys. Today, we have junior NBA programs in almost 20 countries in Africa. And in those 20 countries, we have girls really taking
up the opportunities that we're building for them to participate in the game of basketball. When it comes to Basketball Without Borders, which is a camp that has really been very instrumental in identifying talent. In fact, we have, for the men, we have some of the most popular NBA players that have come from Basketball Without Borders. The good news is that we have women that have also participated in this program, and we continue to have camps for girls and boys to come and participate in these programs as well. We've also had opportunities for women to participate in the profession of sports. If you go to the Basketball Africa League, we have BAL finals happening in Kigali today. If you go to watch a game, so I'm sure some of you will be there, look at the court and look at the people around the court, the officials. You'll see women participating in that. You'll see on the scoring table, you'll see officials of women, you'll see commissioners, you'll see reporters, you'll see women participating in the professions around the basketball. And that's really what we really want to see more of. And that's also why we have a program called BAL for Her. There's a workshop that is ongoing today. There's a camp that started yesterday for girls, and the idea is really about opportunity. So I think, back to your question, Ozonnia, for me, the most important is creating opportunities that allows girls and boys to participate in showing what their talent is. And when they do, you will find that they can actually excel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry. Thank you, Claire. So now talking about opportunities, Katharina, I'd like to come to you. Because in the fields of politics, technology, and finance, those seem the ones that are particularly constrained against women. So how can we leverage the strengths of women leaders and their perspectives to drive systems change?
Thank you, Ozonnia. And thanks, Claire. I think I'm super excited to actually learn more about some of the initiatives. I would say that, yes, the industries you mentioned are probably more male-dominated than others. But I would say that the whole system that we navigate in is overall very male-dominated, leadership itself. So for me, what I would say is that probably two things that helped me, or probably two instances that shaped my thinking most, is one coming from sports. I have been playing sports since I was small, did athletics, didn't like the everyone against everyone thing, went to team sport handball, which is also very male dominated, right? But the two things that I think I took through out my career as a kind of guiding principle is one, playing in a mixed team and learning how to value the strengths but also weaknesses of men and women, right? But then also playing in an all-female team and learning what it is about to have true allyship with females, which I think often I hear is a key issue when it comes to fighting for equity from women for women. I hear a lot of that. So when it comes to changing some of those systems, I feel like both of those aspects have helped me, or is something that I try to implement when it comes to my own organization, Pulse. Right? So at Pulse, we're in 6 countries. We have more than 60% African females in our senior leadership, right? So that's, of course, a very no-brainer thing for me to do, right? We're in media, of course, but I would say that media obviously is shaping narratives and has the power then also to shape narratives in terms of leadership and in terms of how also other industries can be portrayed and seen. So that's maybe the one thing. The second thing is that I would say that there are clear numbers. I think there's one maybe study from McKinsey. I think a lot of you have heard that diverse teams and teams that consist especially of at least 50% female leadership team have a more than 20% higher chance to succeed, like top line, but also bottom line when it comes to financial results, profitability. So we know that, but the question is, of course, what are we doing around that? And again, I feel like that's a thing that can guide us and that should guide us for other industries as well. And I would say that, again, for Pulse, for us, that's a no-brainer as well. Again, we work in media, but we also do marketing. So we work across the different industries. We work with banks, insurances, right? And finding solutions for them. Again, we know that a diverse team is more capable of finding solutions to complex problems that we have, I think, enough of, right? So in a day-to-day for me, that can mean a simple thing as moderating a editorial meeting or a brainstorming meeting for a marketing campaign by making sure that diverse opinions are heard. Right? I mean, I think I mentioned I mainly live in Nigeria, a country where we have, I think, more than 300 ethnicities. We have more than 500 languages. So coming from there to make sure that something resonates with at least one whole country, you already need to integrate a lot of diverse opinions. So that's what I would say. So looking at the results and from there building diverse teams so that you are more successful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And you've highlighted two broad themes that I'd like to interrogate a little bit more with all of us present, particularly the role of media in shaping narratives. I know that a number of us in this hall are media owners. I'm looking for my friend Gabi Ochridako, chair of Africa Prosperity Network. I'd like to invite him at some point, being a media owner, how he used his platform, any reflections on how using media can be a platform for shaping narratives around the role of women in Ghana or in any other context that you operate in. But also, we have a number of female CEOs here. And it would be nice to hear a reflection. How did you manage to get to the table? Somebody said here that Africa, yes, I remember you, my dear sister, we don't want to be on the menu, we're on the table. But currently women are still on the menu in Africa. And the discourse is how to make women be around the table. So I'd like to hear from a number of female CEOs here. How did you manage to be on the table and what lessons can we learn from that? But before I come to you, I'd like to come to my dear sister, Michaella. The whole issue around how we build consensus and build complementarity to make it happen. I think Rwanda is a powerful example of how to intentionally seek to uproot the system of patriarchy and other structures that hold women down. So how would you measure the progress that we've made in Rwanda relative to the rest of the continent? But also, what other change efforts? What are the metrics do we need to use to measure that women are no longer on the menu, but that they could be on the table?
Thank you very much. Good morning again. Indeed, Rwanda has made incredible strides in women empowerment. And as we like to say, numbers don't lie. So in our country, if you look at the parliament, we have 63% of women in parliament, which is a record worldwide. In cabinet, we have 50% of women, 50% of men. And parity is just part of who we are as Rwandan. And that has been spearheaded by the leadership of His Excellency Paul Kagame and by the wider government and right after then, the whole nation. Historically, women were part of leadership in Rwanda way before we were colonized. So this is not a new concept for us, but it's a concept that had to be reinforced after the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. And we had to create tools to ensure that indeed women are able to participate actively in the development of the country. That starts with education. Education is the greatest equalizer. As I think it's Nelson Mandela who said that. Yes, thank you, Claire. And it starts in school. Do we put our girls in school? And do they stay in school? Primary school, secondary school, university. When they reach puberty, do they have access to sanitary products so they can continue going to class? Are these products tax exempted? I think the 360 of policy makers, lawmakers, taxation policy makers needs to sit around question of women empowerment because at every level of a life of a woman, there is a chance that she is withdrawn from the opportunity to continue and join the active workforce. Again, in Rwanda, a lot of scholarship are extended to girls in all sectors, but more so in STEM, in science and technology. And then when you want to join, when you're about to join the workforce, opportunities are there. And I think it's no surprise that you have two Rwandan women on this panel and who have both been and are in the C-suite, and that thanks to a country that has taken a deliberate decision to empower its women. It's not by faith. It was a deliberate decision of the leadership of Rwanda to empower women. And I think if we can have more, if this can be emulated wide and far, we will see more and more women reaching heights. But then also when you reach the rooms where decisions are taken, when you sit in boards, you need allies, you need support, you need mentors, because it's not easy. It's not easy, and sometimes you face really rough edges because maybe you are young, because you are a woman, because you are a darker skinned woman. That happened as well. I sat in boards where I was the only African, literally, and the youngest and the only woman. And I can tell you that it was challenging. So you have to have a right level of confidence. You need to know who you are. You need to have the right skills, and stand your ground. So also, build confidence in our girls and women is something that is extremely important. And I see my friend Michelle here, who is a great leadership coach and whose topic around confidence and leadership are very dear to her. And I think she should contribute as well when we open the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Michaella. You raise an important question about the challenges that women face, even to break those barriers. And that leads me to the discourse on mentorship. And so I like to listen to Carol, but also I want Michelle to come into that conversation on mentorship, because the tendency is that we think that this is very helpful in terms of women's leadership and systems change. Now, some of the experience on mentorship is that actually that some of the first generation of women activists are not keen on letting go, and not creating a pipeline for succession. And that it's almost like, this is my turf. The whole discourse around liberation, right? We liberated the country, or we liberated the continent, we liberated women from patriarchy, and therefore we have to stay. And so from the experience of Africa's soft power, but looking at other women's movements across the continent, what can we learn? What do we need to do differently? And after you, I'd like to bring in Michelle also to reflect as a coach. What are the challenges you're finding that needs to be overcome in terms of this transition and building capacity and succession, so that we create activists who are strong in the movement, not just who create a critical mass of women activists. Over to you, Carol.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about it from the systems change scenario and some of the findings. Last year, actually, we started the work last year at Africa Soft Power, and we launched a white paper that was really talking about what are the things that are impeding, because the intent is there. There's so many conversations around this. So the intent is there. What we're finding is, what are the tools that are available to close the gaps that we see? So last year, I think that white paper launched this year and will be accessible to all the attendees, was around advancing gender equity on the continent, and really looking at the continent-wide challenges and how to leverage the private sector as a starting point to be able to navigate some of these challenges. And some of the findings, some were pretty obvious. Everything is obvious after you've done the research, I suppose. So some were pretty obvious, but some were also quite disconcerting in terms of, why is it that even where there are very specific initiatives, the tools are lacking to be able to cross that barrier? So things like representation, women representation in either corporate sector, on boards, in politics across the continent. It's not that there is no intent, nor is it that there is no policies in place. What there is that there are no tools to be able to go from policy to accountability. So we launched the Gender Certification Program. And the Gender Certification Program was really to get the private sector involved to be able to create systems within their organizations that allow for what Michaella was talking about, ensuring that throughout the career of the woman, interrupted as it may be by things that are necessary, like life, that if you went away on maternity leave, you would still come back and find your job. and that you would not have to be set back a few years because of a choice that you made from a family perspective. So those things are lacking in private sector organizations as part of not just policy, but how do you implement that? So the certification program was supposed to bring these things to light, get private sector to embrace the fact that something needed to be done differently, and hold them accountable for being able to deliver what they put as their mission. And a lot of private sector have this mission. They have this vision, they have this policy, but there's absolutely no intent for implementation. So that's where Africa Soft Power thinks that systems change could happen. And yes, there is all the other incidentals that happen, the mentorship program, but that's great. But if there is no policy to ensure that there is opportunity, it becomes just another program in the business, which is what we don't want.
Excellent segue to bring in Michelle, because it's not just about incubation. We train people, we mentor them, we encourage them. But where are the tools of work? Where is the systems change that enables the transformation to occur? So from your position as a leadership coach, how are you working with your mentees not to create disillusion, given the absence of this formalized transition to make it work?
Yeah, so an amazing conversation. I think there's something really important about what Carol said there around the accountability part. And the issue that we're talking about in terms of confidence and this idea that women don't want to kind of pull other women through that door as well. And I think essentially that we have to see this as a systems problem, that the system creates the oppression and the internalized oppression that happens to those that are marginalized. So it isn't the responsibility of the woman or whoever is marginalized to do something to rectify that system, to redress it. It is the responsibility of the leaders of those organizations, of the ecosystems, to actually redress that gap. And the way that they do that is by exactly what Carol was saying, creating policy, creating outcomes that are equitable and fair, and being very, very, to Michaella's point, deliberate and intentional. Now that has to be wrapped into people's professional and personal development and to their performance-related pay, if you really want to get radical about this, so that they are held to account through their job descriptions for creating equitable and fair, inclusive practice for all women, regardless of sexuality, regardless of background, of culture and religion, and all of those other protected characteristics. So for me, that bit around the internalized oppression comes from the system that creates that doubt and that scarcity mentality within that woman, within that individual, that if they do allow that door to be opened, that their power will be taken away from them. And that's a very, very sophisticated thing that happens. And that's what oppression does. It robs us of our sense of our humaneness, our sense of humanity, our sense of how can we share this power. So this relates to power, essentially. As just unjustly as it is, we as women have to find the inner resource to navigate those intersections of oppression, whether that's the issue of colorism. As a lighter skinned black woman, I have to acknowledge the privilege that comes with that, and that my darker skinned black sisters have a much more difficult ride. And so how do you navigate that? Well, you have to be able to draw on the inner resources of figuring out the part that you play to challenge the status quo. And I talk about this a lot with my mentees. What kind of change maker are you? Are you somebody that is a strategic thinker? Are you a Serena Williams positive disruptor? I always bring in the sporting analogy. I can't help it. Or are you a empathetic storyteller like a Simone Biles? Figure out the style and the change maker that you want to be in the world and redress it through that avenue and that way of being. So I think there are so many different elements to this discussion, but I hope that's contributed to our talk today.
It certainly does contribute. But there's a trend that I find worrying, that both yourself, Carol, and Michaella have highlighted. The bar is set exceedingly high for you as a woman. Woman of color, you have to prove yourself, you have to show you master everything, otherwise you might not get there. Okay, let's talk to the women CEOs in the house. Now you are CEO. How are you disrupting these structural impediments? Where are the women CEOs in the house? What do we learn from your experience? Yes, I see a hand up there. Because this is worrying, right? Nobody raises the same bar for a man. Nobody does. I never had to consider those for myself. I felt I needed to compete in any opportunity. There may be reasons why I wasn't chosen.
Maybe it's the men setting the bars to begin with.
I was just
Obviously,
about to say.
that's right. I agree. Yeah, I agree, Claire. The men have been the ones setting the bar. So now, as a he for she, and in this conversation, we have the opportunity, at least for those of us women CEOs here, how have you disrupted this structural impediment in your own organization? So we can learn and then take it systemically across our various systems and processes, isn't it? Okay, let's hear the person with the microphone.
My name is Frances Kokpom. I'm CEO of Jamja, based in Accra. So, I mean, my organization, I think the focus for me is making it as conducive to women learning and building teamwork within each other, but the men, and focusing equally on the men that I hire and making sure that they understand the experiences of the women that they are working with. Because I think one of the biggest gaps in this conversation is the men. As much as we have the conversations, they are the ones in positions of power. They're the ones whose mindset change is required in order to say, oh, actually, I'm very comfortable working with a woman. I'm very comfortable choosing a woman over a man. I'm very comfortable in that space. And that comes from home, that comes from culture, that comes from everything around the business environment. And so I think it's really important within a business environment to then hone in on that, because I don't have control of a man's that I hire, his work life necessarily, but his home life, but his work life I have some input in. And so for me, it's, for example, there was a colleague of mine and she had to get in a vehicle with 3 other colleagues, and she didn't feel comfortable. And one of the other colleagues was like, oh, why? That shouldn't be a problem. And then the other female colleague stepped in and went, no, if she doesn't feel comfortable, she can get an Uber. And the company will pay for that, not a problem, because it's about her comfort level. And the gentleman didn't understand him. So she had to explain to him, like, well, that's the experience and that's her experience. If she feels discomfort, that is a relevant and an okay experience to have. It's not a reflection of the men that she is sitting in the car with, right? And so I think it's about pointing those out and allowing and having the conversations within businesses with the men in the businesses to say those experiences are valid and you need to understand them and explore them and be more comfortable with what a female experience is and acknowledge the fact that it is different from a man's experience.
Absolutely. Another female CEO in the house? Another reflection, and I'm looking to see my friend and brother, Gabi Ochiridako. I don't see him yet, because I said, yes, a reflection here. Bring the mic to the front.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Asnuki Odofi. I'm managing partner of Africa Law Praxis NG. I think the most important thing is to work with men that actually believe that women are not inferior and are equal to, and sometimes even
How many of those are there?
There are quite a few.
You sure?
Yes, I had the advantage, I guess, of being raised by a feminist. My father raised me believing that I wasn't disadvantaged because of my gender. So I think...
And how did your father's siblings regard him on those thoughts?
Well, a lot of people, to speak Yoruba, they used to say, "Ombomo ije," which is you're spoiling this child.
Exactly.
But, he didn't care. He just made sure that I was brought up as a confident human being, not as a woman or a man, just a confident human being. But back to the work aspect of it, it's also about the kind of people you work with. I remember one of the first places I worked, women were not allowed to go outside Lagos for any court cases or anything like that. They just assumed that because you're female, they were protecting you, but they were also giving you a disadvantage because you didn't have the experiences that your male colleagues. I remember my first time of going to Supreme Court, I had to fight tooth and nail to be able to leave Lagos to go to court. So I think who you work with is important. Right now, I'm the managing partner of the firm, and,
Okay, how have you changed those rules at the firm now that you are the managing partner? What have you done specifically?
Well, I guess it's not something you do specifically, but a lot of little things along the way. Like, I remember there was one of our associates that she just had a baby, but there was something we needed to do that she was perfect for. I had a conversation with her about it, about whether she was comfortable leaving her baby or whether she wanted to take her baby along and how we could work with her to make sure everything went well. And she came back and thanked me, and she was practically in tears that nobody has ever actually sort of wanted to get a point of view on anything, but just assumed that yeah, you can't do it. So it's the little things, not like any kind of major policy change, because our policy is equality anyway, but just those little things that are like, I guess, the soft things that make the difference.
Thank you. Just to
Thank you.
provoke all of us a bit more on this, because these little things become personalized. So when she was head of the chambers, that's how she ran it. But when she leaves, the system kicks in. That's why we're having this conversation. You have to, unless you are able to unbundle, restructure the system, because that's why it's called a system. It means it's systemic. It is institutionalized. So we need clear alternative mechanisms that for which there is accountability. Carol used the word accountability for checking in to making sure that behaviors are punished for the wrong ones and the correct behaviors are rewarded. So, from the sports management perspective, what have you managed to do in changing this paradigm?
It's still a long way to go.
Okay.
And now, essentially because sports is seen as a male dominated field. In fact, the men take ownership of that space. And so women are seen as interlopers in management, not saying participation. Participation, we tick all the boxes. But when it comes to either running an organization, coaching, let me tell you one of the saddest things that happened to me. I also serve as the chairperson of the Nigeria Women's Football League, and by extension, I run the clubs and leagues in the country. And this last week, we held our Super Six tournament for the Premiership League. That's the top tier. And the Super Six is where you finish playing the league, the top 6 teams gathered for us to choose the winner. And the 6 teams were all coached by men. So I sat in the box and was watching every match, 15 matches I had to sit through. I watched men. There's only one woman who is a coach among 16 teams, which is why one of the thrusts of our Women Football Rising is that in 5 years, we must have female coaches. Put them, and it is the challenge of them staying, not that they don't start the process. The process is long. It could take you 10 years to become a CAF grade A coach. But it is getting women to stay because it is so challenging, then the men create problems. So here's the thing. When you get to an area like sports, you just need to be prepared. The pushback I've got has been such that it is about how you now present yourself and how you now make sure that the men feel that they're also getting what they want. They don't want to hear that you are the one that is the expert in an area that they think they're experts. And so you've got to, it's a carrot and stick approach. That's where I've got to where I am.
Carrot and sticks, but also about coalition building and partnerships. And I'm sure that's something my panelists will come to. And I'd like to, after my panel this time, I'd like to come back to you on how then are you building coalitions and partnerships for change? Whether in democracies you walk through the institutions of governance, right? So parliaments, female parliamentarians, parliamentary committees, proposing bills and legislation and things like that. And I'd like to hear how some of us are dealing with those. But now I want to come back to Clare, because now we hear from everyone that we are wired differently. But women bring significant, deliberative, deeply thought approaches to governing, to decision making. And so we look at where we are today as a global community in terms of women needing to be at the heart of decision making to address global challenges. And I don't need to cite examples. You know this more than I do, my dear sister. Why has that been impossible? And what do we need to do differently? Because everywhere I turn, I see crisis, I see conflict, I see violence, I see disruption, I see social or disorder. But women at the helm can actually address all of those issues. But the testosterone in us, the desire to prove is making it difficult for us. What needs to change? And how do we do it?
Have more women.
How? How do we put them there?
Have more women leaders.
Yes.
There's somebody who wrote a book that was titled Ego is the Enemy. And if you haven't read that book, you should read it. It talks about how ego makes decision-making very subjective. And when it's very subjective, it's not very accurate. And I think the one thing that women have is less ego. Not absence of ego, but I think it's less ego. And I think that allows women to be very good collaborators, a very good teamwork. You know, there's an African saying that, you know, when you're standing, you make the man feel like he's the head and the woman is the neck. And the woman is comfortable to be a neck, to look like she's number two, but she's actually making the decisions and moving the head. And the woman is comfortable to be that because we believe in teamwork, in collaboration. At the end of the day, it's about the results that you're going to be impacting. Back to the question around women and men, and I think that role models are very important. Role models that demonstrate that women can actually perform. Yes, there might be biases, there might be people that need to change their mindset, but when the results are clear and delivered, there's no arguing with results. So for me, my advice to women is you get to that position, you get an opportunity, show that you can actually deliver and you can actually perform, and be comfortable to stipulate the results that you have achieved. I think one thing that women do is that they're happy to do the work and have the results and not even be able to communicate and to claim those results. I think it's very important to see stories of women that are performing, stories of women that are winning, stories of women that are actually really performing. Once we have more numbers of role models, of examples, of demonstration that women are actually delivering, and you actually show that, you see people like Christine Lagarde, who was at IMF, delivered, went to the European Investment Bank. You have women role models in sports. Even in WNBA, you've heard about Chine and Neka Ogumike from Nigeria, who are doing very well at WNBA. You've heard of Clarice from Mozambique, from Dia from Senegal. We need to hear more of those stories of people that are actually going there and excelling, because the more numbers, the more scale we demonstrate that women can get there and do it and perform, the less doubters, the less issues, the less you have to prove yourself all the time, because the results are actually proving them for yourself. So I think role models and examples of success is very critical in this story.
Excellent.
Can I weigh in on that conversation?
Yes, of course. Yes, Carol, please.
And it's an example, because I think what Claire's raised is really the role of media.
That's why I wanted to hear Gabby, and I don't see him here yet. Yeah, but go ahead. I'll look for him.
And that role of media is in so many different forms. We did a study last year, again, with Africa Soft Power Group, and it was the representation of women in the medical field. And your guess is like mine. Every time there was a doctor, it was male. Every time there was a nurse, it was a female. That's the media story that we see. And for as long as we see those media stories, the people who want to enter, the girls who want to enter into the medical profession are already wired into the profession of nursing, simply because this is how we are represented. So media is such a critical part of how to be able to change the system from a very early stage.
Which is why the intervention from behind about a father who was very much interested about the daughter and couldn't care what his siblings said is so powerful. Because this socialization begins from the home, about roles and expectations. Your job is to be a carer. His job is to be a breadwinner and to soar and conquer the world. So the media, but socialization at home, more fathers that are he for she's can begin to make the difference. And I'm assuming that every man here is converted, but I don't want to make that assumption.
And more working mothers.
Yes, and more working fathers. I mean, working mothers and home caring fathers, because I've had staff for us as a United Nations system, you would assume that automatically you are champions. And interacting with staff in a number of countries, they're happy to say I'm a champion in the office, but at home they put their feet up, and madam has to go to the kitchen and prepare the meal and take care of everything else.
Having been a champion in the office also.
Yeah, exactly, having been a champion. So how do we disrupt these attitudes, these behaviors? So Katharina, I come back to you. How can we use technology to disrupt this traditional mindset and traditional concepts? And by tradition, I'm not meaning the traditional institution, because we have champions like His Majesty here. The tradition is assumed notions, things we've taken for granted as ways of behavior and organizing our society. That's what I mean by tradition. Can AI be helpful here? What do we need to do differently using technology?
Okay, big question. And I love also the angles around media and how, of course, storytelling, representation, visible representation is probably something that shapes decision making of young girls, of women in general, of feeling passively empowered in their way. And I would love to actually speak about the stories of the currently missing female Nigerian coaches. I mean, again, as much as we're in the private sector, we need to make money, but there are a lot of things that we, of course, can drive as a company what we believe in. So one of the stories that we're currently working on is a documentary about Angela Okutoi from Kenya in her race to the Olympics, hopefully, as a young Kenyan tennis player. Not sure if all of you are familiar. I'm a fanatic tennis player and watcher, so I know her very well. So, but there need to be more stories like that, right? Like from the ground and from those women who can, be role models. But to your question, I think for AI and what technology can do to help disrupting that, I feel like on a macro level or holistic level, I feel like AI is obviously something that needs to be part of the solution, I think, because from everything that I think we know today, it will be a big part of every part of our lives, right? It will disrupt a lot of things. And we know that AI is obviously how it's being trained on data from over the past few hundred years, right? Has a tendency to have inbuilt biases, gender biases, racial biases, because a lot of the content that was used to train those models has been created over the time with existing biases. So I think there's a active need to actively participate at the heart in how this technology is being shaped, because otherwise the foundation of it is already leading us into the wrong direction. And all of this very positive opportunities of having AI that can shape decision making, more data driven, more equity driven, would be still based on data that is actually not equity driven, right? So that's one. So I think that's very crucial. Again, like for my organization, there are of course small parts that you can do. You can make women understand that this is a new technology and they should engage early and not think it's not for them, right? I think there's a tendency of feeling like, oh, it's technology, I've never been good at that. But it's very accessible, right? And doing that as an organization for probably all of us, something that we can do, leave room for mistakes, not expect that people already can do it, but be very open as a leader probably and say, hey, I'm also trying. There's no one who's an expert today. On like really a micro level rather, I had a conversation with a friend of mine from Ghana last week. She has a women's collective called Omoji and Co., working with creatives, female creatives, especially also doing sustainable work. And she observed that over the past 5-6 years, she's built her collective. She worked with so many amazing women that stay on a boutique level when it comes to their companies, right? They're excellent at what they're doing, and they're not necessarily missing anything to scale. But the one thing that was a pattern is that they all missed the inbuilt belief that technology and building their own platform is something that is for them. They were using a lot of other platforms, but they were always a bit not thinking that they can just create their own. They have to focus on their primary field of excellence, which maybe is their creative industry. So I think this is the other thing where I feel like having women also stepping into building those platforms, owning them, is probably something that can change and disrupt who has a place on the table.
Thank you. I'd like to pose a final question to Michaella and Carol. So any other most critical factors you think are important in terms of addressing these systemic challenges that we face?
I think the discussion covered mostly all aspects. I think we need to leave this discussion with a deep belief that education is the greatest equalizers. We have to educate our girls. We have to respect women. At the end of the day, it's about respect, nothing else. We are human beings, just like men, and we deserve to be respected as human. And sometimes you go into those rooms and you don't get that respect. And I think those conversations, before we talk about AI, technology, all that, it starts there. It starts there with a girl child, with the adolescent girl, with a young woman who gets children, who is pregnant, who delivers, who has maternity leave, who goes back to work, who grow her career, etc. And then policies at national level, a deep, clear political intention to put women on the same stage as men and give them the same opportunities. And then it becomes culture, it becomes who people are. Today in Rwanda, and we have it in many rooms, I sat in many rooms working on conference program or event program at the time, even when Clare was at RDB. For us, having equal numbers of women and men on a panel is no-brainer. But then you go to other places and you see an all men panel, and maybe next time we have to have more equity in this panel on conversation about gender equity. But yes, I think it comes to that respecting women and creating a safe environment for them at every stage of their life so that they can unfold their full potential.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Carol. Any final words from you?
I was going to hand it over to him because he now walked into the room just in time.
Yes.
He had a question for you.
Yes, Carol, so if you don't mind, Gabby is back in the room, and now you are sponsoring Africa Soft Power. You're a media owner, one of the most prominent media institutions in Ghana. And the question is the role of the media in shaping opinion, in unpacking the structural barriers that hold women behind. How have you confronted these issues? How did you deal with the pushback from politicians and from other institutions that are extremely entrenched in Ghana, given our familiarity with your home context? Maybe we'll give you the final word. Thank you, Carol. I'll come back to you, Carol, for 1 minute, but I think it's important to hear Gabby's views.
I think the most powerful institution that creates an obstacle are men as an institution. men is the greatest, if you like, institution that is holding women back in Africa. I say so because you feel it in the workplace, you feel it at home, and I think the role of the media, I mean, for my part, I can say, and I have another editor here with me, Gerhard, the role of the media, if you look at even our media house, for instance, a lot of our presenters are women. We have a breakfast show. It's a woman who basically hosts it, and she has a co-host. A lot of the afternoon programs to do with social issues, we make sure women host them. And well, I mean, there's a bit of a bias, maybe 60 women, 60% women, 40% men. Because I think it's important, because when you look at our universities in Ghana and in most of West Africa, it's about 50 or a little bit over 50% are women. And this has been happening over the last 10, 15 years. So what's important is that those of us who see ourselves as social actors or leaders or whatever should find a way to create a bias, a conscious bias that will help the balance. And I think I do that in my media organization. I do that on our board, Africa Prosperity Network, for instance, Advisory Council. 60% of them are women. You know, and of course, we are in Rwanda, where women are in leadership positions. So I think really it takes some conscious effort, because the tradition, the conventions, and the culture, if you don't play a proactive role in changing things, then it will not change. And I think the media generally have a big role to play. And I see women taking the lead in that respect. And we do so with our media houses as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Carol, the final words.
Thank you.
In a minute.
So one of the things that we do at Africa Soft Power is recognizing exactly that challenge. And it's our intent to ensure that we provide the opportunity for people who act as role models. And we're actually quite honored that every time we invite them, they say yes to come and speak at this summit. I think a fantastic example for this year is with us today. Her Excellency, Dr. Joyce Banda, a first in many, many ways.
Yeah.
And we want to lean in on some of her experiences and to share with us her journey. And many people in this room today may not know that journey because the media has been muted on a lot of it. And so we're honored when we have guests amongst us who say yes to our invitation, who take time, who come freely and willingly to come and talk about this issue. And I'm hoping that over the rest of the day today, the reason why we have one whole day dedicated to this is because we want to solve this problem. And we have people in the room that can solve this problem. And we want the people in the room that can solve this problem to help us solve this problem. And we're grateful that, you've been inducted into the women fold because you're a great representer in many, many ways. You speak passionately about it, and we want more people to speak passionately about it. So for us at ASP, we're deliberate. We have a clear intent, and we may a little bit be biased because we think that sometimes to be able to bring the needle to the middle, there might be a need to stretch a little bit more. And we are very conscious that our job is equity, and that equity doesn't exclude male or female. That equity just brings everybody into the right balance.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Carol, for anticipating my concluding statement in reference to Her Excellency, because I didn't want to invite her into this conversation because the next session, actually, we can then benefit from her experience and her journey. She's been one of my mentors in life, and we've come a long way together, learning from her journey and using those experiences as modeling our own personal journeys. But also the presence of His Majesty every single time we have Africa Soft Power, because the traditional institution is perceived differently in many contexts. But this is one king who is an agent of change and transformation, and modeling that in terms of how he leads his people, but also his voice, the deep resonance of his voice with all our political and other leaders in Nigeria, among other champions like him in different parts of West Africa. So one of the most prominent traditional leaders in West Africa for lending his time and his voice to be here. And so in concluding our discussion, I remind myself of 3 sayings that are very popular among us Nigerians. You say that you cannot shave someone's head in their absence. That's about representation. Representation for women, right? That they could be present, so you can't shave your head in your absence. You cannot clap with one hand. Yeah? So it takes the presence, participation of women to be part of the development journey. And if you have your hands tied behind your back, you cannot win in any wrestling or boxing tournament. So majority of your population are constrained by being in that public space. You're confining them to the private space. And so you're surprised that on the SDGs, many countries are not doing well. So it's not rocket science, right? It's an enlightened self-interest, enlightened political leadership that needs to make this happen, but beginning from the home all the way to the political space. And what an A-list panel, outstanding conversations. I apologize to those who didn't have opportunity to speak, but this is the course of the next 2 days for the discussion. So please join me in applauding our outstanding panel, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.